Good evening, dear listeners, and welcome to another chilling episode of our scary stories. As the night envelops us, remember to pull your blankets a tad tighter, and let the dim light of your device be the only beacon in this vast darkness. Tonight, we'll journey into a tale of masks, mystery, and malevolence. But remember, while some stories end when the night is over, others, they linger, haunting the corners of our minds. Let's begin. The Whittington Mansion stood towering over the hillside, a sentinel of stone and history. Its pointed turrets and Gothic arches spoke of a time when architecture was both an art and a mystery. The mansion's silhouette, stark against the deep purple hue of the approaching evening, cast long, wavering shadows across the verdant grounds. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of ancient trees, creating whispers that seemed to echo the murmured secrets of the past. Inside, lavish preparations were underway. The ballroom, vast and opulent, shimmered in golden light. Crystal chandeliers, alight with hundreds of candles, refracted beams and sparkling bursts, dancing across the polished marble floor. The scent of roses and white lilies filled the air, their intoxicating fragrance mingling with the faint aroma of beeswax from freshly polished furniture. In the corners, maids and servants busied themselves, straightening tapestries, setting out silver platters laden with delicacies, and ensuring every detail was perfect for the masquerade. The anticipation was thick, almost tangible, as if the mansion itself was holding its breath, waiting for night to fall and the revelry to begin. Outside, carriages began to arrive. Men and women in elegant evening wear disembarked, their chatter animated, masks held in gloved hands or already adorning their faces. The mansion's iron gates, usually imposing, were thrown open wide, welcoming the guests into its grandeur and mystery. As they entered, a unique invitation was presented to a select few. The paper was deep crimson, almost the color of dried blood, with an embossed golden bat at its center. The bat's wings spread wide, as if ready to take flight. These invites were the talk of the town, coveted and yet feared. For to hold one was to be part of a tale that was older than the mansion itself. Dr. Lydia Mercer, the striking woman with raven black hair and sharp, intelligent eyes, held her invitation up to the flickering candlelight. The bat seemed to move, its details taking on an eerie realism. Lydia's thoughts drifted to the legends. Her great-great-grandmother had been a guest at one such ball, only to vanish without a trace. The memories were a heavy weight in her heart, a mix of curiosity and dread. A fellow guest, a gentleman named Henry Clarington, noticed Lydia's absorption in the invite and approached her. "Quite the piece of art, isn't it?" he remarked, nodding towards the card. Lydia looked up, her thoughts interrupted. "Yes," she replied slowly, "but it's more than just art. It's history. It's a connection to the past." Henry chuckled. "You always were one for the dramatic, Lydia. It's just a party." But as he said it, his eyes flickered uncertainly to his own invite, and for a fleeting moment they shared a mutual understanding, a shared apprehension of the night ahead. The haunting chords of a grand piano filled the room, signaling the start of the evening. Guests began to mingle, drinks in hand, the room abuzz with excitement. Yet, beneath the glamour and gaiety, there was an undercurrent of tension, a sense of something more profound waiting to unfold. And as the mansion settled into the night, with masked figures dancing under the shimmering lights, the shadows of the past began to stir, ready to claim the present. Whittington Mansion's grand ballroom was now a whirlwind of colors in motion. Each guest seemed to outdo the other in their masquerade attire. Voluminous gowns of satin and silk swayed to the rhythm of the music, feathers and jewels gleaming in the candlelight. Men in tailored suits and cloaks chatted animatedly, their identities concealed behind masks of gold, silver, and myriad other designs. Laughter and snippets of conversation blended with the alluring strains of the orchestra. Here, a woman dressed as a midnight siren with a flowing dress adorned with tiny silver stars. There, a man in a green velvet suit resembling the forest's depth, a mask of twisted ivy and leaves covering his face. Amidst the lively crowd, Lydia, with her intricate lace mask, was engaged in conversation with a group of acquaintances when the massive wooden doors creaked open, announcing a new arrival. A collective hush seemed to pass through the room, as if the air itself had grown still. From the entrance, a figure emerged, commanding attention without uttering a word. He wore an immaculate black suit cut in a style that seemed out of time, echoing a bygone era. But it was his mask that captured the imagination, an intricate piece of craftsmanship, pitch black with eyes that were brilliant cuts of ruby, glinting and capturing every flicker of light. As the man made his way through the crowd, Lydia overheard hushed conversations. "Who is that? Have you ever seen him before?" The murmurs and speculative whispers grew, but one name seemed to surface repeatedly, spoken in tones of reverence and fear: Lord Vailska. Henry, who had been watching the scene unfold, leaned closer to Lydia, his voice low. "Rumors say he's been around for centuries. No one truly knows his origins, but those eyes, they're said to have seen empires rise and fall." The atmosphere of the room had transformed. While the music continued and conversations resumed, an undercurrent of fascination and unease prevailed. Guests stole glances at Lord Vailska, trying to discern the man behind the mask. Lydia felt a strange sensation, as if invisible threads were drawing her towards this enigmatic stranger. Each step he took resonated with her, a pull she couldn't resist. Before she knew it, she found herself standing directly in his path. Lord Vailska halted, and those gleaming ruby eyes fixed upon Lydia's. No words were spoken, yet an unspoken understanding passed between them. It was as if the world had faded, the background noise dimmed, and they stood alone in their silent communion. A moment later, Lydia was jolted back to reality as Henry touched her arm gently. "Are you all right, Lydia?" His voice held genuine concern. She nodded, her voice a whisper, "Yes, I think so." But her gaze lingered on Lord Vailska, a mix of intrigue and apprehension clouding her eyes. She couldn't shake off the feeling that the night held more mysteries than anyone could have anticipated. The strings of the orchestra picked up, announcing the beginning of a waltz, its rhythm both enchanting and haunting. Guests paired off, moving gracefully to the melody, their steps meticulous and rehearsed. As the music swelled, Lydia felt a cool hand on her wrist. She turned, finding herself face to face with the ruby eyes of Lord Vailska. There was a gentle insistence in his grip, and without a spoken word, she was drawn into his embrace. Together, they began to move, their steps synchronized, effortlessly flowing with the rhythm. The world around them seemed to blur. As Lydia was swept up in the dance, her senses were consumed by the man leading her. The soft rustle of his suit, the cold touch of his hands, and the intoxicating scent that clung to him, a mix of old books and winter nights. As they glided across the ballroom floor, Lord Vailska leaned in, his voice smooth as velvet, yet carrying an edge. "You're not like the others, Dr. Mercer. The mansion speaks to you, doesn't it?" Lydia, caught off guard, hesitated for a moment. "My family's history is intertwined with this place," she replied cautiously. "The stories, the legends, they were bedtime tales for me." A slight, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Ah, the legends. They tend to outlive us all, don't they?" Before she could respond, their dance came to a sudden, jarring halt. A gasp from the gathered crowd punctured the music, pulling all eyes to the center of the room. A young man lay on the ground, his face deathly pale, a look of horror frozen in his eyes. As a woman knelt beside him, pulling back his shirt collar, the unmistakable sight of two small puncture wounds on his neck was revealed. An immediate buzz of panic and confusion erupted. "Someone call a doctor," cried one guest. "Is this part of the entertainment?" Another wondered aloud, a nervous tinge to their voice. But as some guests hurried to assist and others murmured about the possibility of it being a staged event, Lydia's eyes met Lord Vailska's. The unspoken question hung in the air between them, but neither voiced it. Breaking their gaze, Lydia rushed to the fallen guest, her heart racing. The chilling tales of her childhood, tales she'd dismissed as mere legends, now gnawed at her with an urgency she couldn't ignore. While others may have been fooled by the masquerade, Lydia Mercer had an unsettling feeling that the night's true horror was just beginning. Whittington Mansion, with its expansive corridors and ancient walls, had always been the subject of town legends. Lydia, guided by a blend of dread and determination, began to explore the less frequented parts of the grand residence. The dim light from the flickering chandeliers barely penetrated the looming shadows, but she pressed on. Behind heavy drapes and ornate furnishings, she found hidden doorways leading to uncharted areas of the mansion. Narrow staircases spiraled downwards into cool, musty basements, while others ascended to tucked-away attics filled with relics of the past. In one such attic, a beam of moonlight shone through a cracked window pane, illuminating an old wooden chest. The chest itself was unassuming, but Lydia's instincts told her otherwise. Drawing closer, she noticed a monogram, the very same that had belonged to her great-great-grandmother, Clarissa Mercer. With bated breath, she opened the chest. Dust swirled in the air, and atop a pile of aged letters and trinkets, she found a leather-bound diary. Its pages, though yellowed with age, still held the crispness of carefully penned words. Lydia began to read. Dates from the late 1800s marked the entries. Descriptions of balls, acquaintances, and suitors filled the initial pages. However, as Lydia flipped further, the tone shifted. Clarissa began to speak of a dark suitor with mesmerizing eyes. She wrote of her growing unease, of whispered conversations she overheard, and of strange symbols she came across. It was clear that Clarissa had been trying to decipher a pattern, to understand the unnerving events transpiring around her. Later entries turned desperate. Clarissa spoke of the supernatural, of creatures that walked the night, of a vampire lord with power beyond imagining. She wrote, "He hides in plain sight, shielded by the masquerade. But there are ways, rituals of old, symbols of power." Lydia's heart raced as realization struck. Lord Vailska wasn't just any vampire. He was the very creature responsible for her great-great-grandmother's vanishing. If the diary was to be believed, Clarissa had been close to discovering a method to counteract his power, to stop him. With the diary in hand, Lydia knew she held the key, not only to unraveling the dark history of Whittington Mansion, but also to confronting the menace that was Lord Vailska. The question now was whether she had the courage to use it. In the heart of Whittington Mansion, the grand ball continued in all its opulence. Music flowed like a river through the great hall, carrying with it laughter and the distant chime of glasses toasting. To any outsider, it was the pinnacle of societal gatherings. But beneath the veneer of celebration, a chilling undercurrent ran deep. Lord Vailska, always watchful, had noted Lydia's absence from the festivities. And when she did return, there was a newfound confidence in her stride, a fire in her eyes that hadn't been there before. This did not go unnoticed. Instead of viewing Lydia as another victim, Vailska saw in her a worthy opponent. The age-old game of predator and prey had taken on a new dimension. As the evening progressed, whispers began to grow amongst the guests. Friends were looking for friends who seemed to have vanished into thin air. A chill of unease spread, though many tried to dismiss it as mere paranoia. After all, it was a grand house, and people could be anywhere. But Lydia knew better. She could feel the weight of the game pressing upon her, each move calculated, each step measured, and she was ready. Using the knowledge gleaned from the diary, Lydia discreetly began to set protective measures around the mansion. A circle of salt here, a pendant with ancient symbols there. Rooms that once held laughing guests were turned into safe havens against the lurking darkness. Her actions did not go unnoticed by the keen-eyed. A few guests, sensing the gravity of the situation, aided her, becoming allies in her desperate mission. As the hours ticked by, the dynamic in the mansion shifted. No longer was it just a place of revelry, it had become a battleground. Lydia, armed with ancestral knowledge and surrounded by a small band of protectors, stood in defiance of Lord Vailska. Yet the vampire lord, for all his might, did not rush headlong into confrontation. Instead, he moved like a shadow, always present, always watching. The weight of centuries of experience behind him, Vailska was patient. After all, the night was still young, and in this deadly game, the stakes were higher than they'd ever been. In a secluded corner of the mansion, the flicker of candles lit up an ancient tapestry depicting the Mercer lineage. Lydia, her fingers tracing the delicate threads, felt the weight of generations upon her. The diary, now almost an extension of herself, lay open on a worn table, its pages revealing more of its secrets with every passing moment. It wasn't just the tale of a predator and his prey. It was more profound, more personal. The Mercers, as Lydia came to understand, were not merely victims in this age-old saga. They were guardians, keepers of ancient knowledge, and protectors against the dark. A particular entry in the diary caught Lydia's attention. Clarissa had written of a family legend, of a power that coursed through the Mercer bloodline, a gift to counter the darkness. It was a latent strength, one that could be awakened through a ritual that Clarissa had attempted but never concluded. Lydia's heart raced as she pieced together the puzzle. If she could harness this power, she could stand against Lord Vailska, not just as a mere mortal, but as a beacon of hope against the shadows. With newfound resolve, Lydia began preparations. The diary detailed the ritual, an arrangement of sacred stones in a particular pattern. chance handed down through the ages, and most importantly, a willing heart. The climax of the ritual would necessitate a confrontation with the vampire lord, a drawing of him into the very heart of the ritual to seal his fate. As Lydia and her newfound allies set the stage, the atmosphere in the mansion grew tense. Guests, sensing the impending climax, huddled together, their earlier revelry replaced by a mix of fear and anticipation. Lord Vailska, ever perceptive, felt the shift in energy. The game had evolved, and he was no longer the sole hunter. He could sense Lydia's power growing, her determination becoming a beacon that drew him inexorably towards her. In the grand ballroom, under the ornate chandelier and surrounded by history, the stage was set. Lydia, standing resolute in the center of her ritualistic pattern, called out to the darkness, challenging Lord Vailska to face her. The final showdown, a clash of ages, bloodlines, and fates, was about to begin. The grand ballroom, once filled with laughter, music, and dancing, now lay in oppressive silence. The dim light from the chandeliers above cast long, dark shadows, giving the room an eerie glow. The scent of old wood, mixed with the fragrant remnants of flowers, hung heavily in the air. At the center of the room, Lydia stood, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. Her determination was clear, and her stance resolute. Her feet started to move almost of their own accord, the gentle rhythm of a waltz filling the void. The soft rustle of her gown echoed in the silence, a lone dancer waiting for her partner. Suddenly, from the periphery of her vision, she saw him. Lord Vailska, the ageless enigma, stepped onto the dance floor. There was a predatory elegance about him, every movement calculated and graceful. The distance between them closed, and as he took her hand, their dance began. It wasn't just a dance of bodies, but a dance of minds. With each step, Lydia chanted softly under her breath, weaving the ancient incantations of her ritual into the rhythm of the waltz. The pattern of sacred stones she'd laid out on the floor pulsed with a gentle light, their power growing with each passing moment. Lord Vailska, for all his ancient wisdom and heightened senses, soon picked up on Lydia's intention. The realization dawned upon him, and what began as a dance turned into a tug of war. He countered her every move, his steps trying to disrupt her chant and break the circle of power. Lydia's focus never wavered. With every twirl, every dip, and every step, she pushed forward, her voice growing stronger, the weight of her bloodline giving her strength. The ballroom became their battleground, the echoes of their footsteps, and the beats of their hearts the only sounds. The tension between them was electric. Two formidable forces, one ancient and one newly awakened, locked in a battle that transcended time. With each pass, Lydia could feel the weight of the ritual nearing its climax, the energy in the room reaching a crescendo. And then, in a final, dramatic move, Lydia pulled Lord Vailska close, her voice rising in a triumphant chant, the power of her bloodline surging forth. The vampire lord, sensing the impending danger, struggled against her grasp, his red ruby eyes flaring with a mix of fury and desperation. In that timeless moment, the very fabric of the ballroom seemed to shimmer as the dance of destiny played out between predator and protector. The mansion's grand ballroom had become the theater of legends, and as the clock's chimes resonated, heralding the approach of dawn, Lydia felt the weight of Lord Vailska's resistance weighing. The deep purple hues of twilight began to surrender to the warm oranges and yellows of the morning sun. Each ray that streamed through the stained glass windows brought with it the purity and hope of a new day. The vintage glass refracted the sunlight into kaleidoscopic patterns, which danced and shimmered across the walls and floor. Lord Vailska, once a figure of terror and mystique, now appeared diminished and vulnerable under the burgeoning light. Lydia, her voice unwavering, chanted the last verses of the ritual. As she did, a luminescent tether formed, binding the vampire lord and rendering his sinister power inert. With a final, resonating word, the bond was sealed, and Lord Vailska's reign of terror came to an end. The grandeur of the once powerful vampire seemed to fade, leaving behind just a shell of his former self. Almost as if on cue, the ballroom's grand doors swung open. From the corners of the mansion, the disappeared guests began to return. Disoriented but unharmed, they looked around, trying to piece together the fragmented memories of the night. Whispers and sighs of relief filled the air as friends and family members reunited, their joyous laughter replacing the ominous ambience of the night. Amidst the jubilation, Lydia stood, her heart swelling with emotions. She had not just protected the present but had avenged the past. A legacy of her great-great-grandmother, a tale of bravery and power, had come full circle. With the ancient diary clutched close to her heart, she looked around the mansion with new eyes. It was no longer just a relic of history, but a testament to her family's enduring spirit. As the sun climbed higher, its golden rays bathing the mansion in warmth, the masquerade ball drew to a close. But for Lydia, it marked the beginning of a new chapter. She had not only unmasked a monster and unraveled a mystery, but had also rediscovered her roots, reconnecting with a lineage that spoke of strength, sacrifice, and an undying will to protect. And so, as the day blossomed in its full glory, Lydia Mercer stepped out of the Whittington Mansion, not just as a historian, but as a guardian of secrets, a protector of the innocent, and the heir to a legacy that would never be forgotten. As dawn breaks, we come to the end of our eerie journey. But remember, dear listeners, darkness is but a sunset away, and with it comes the myriad tales that lurk in its shadows. Till our next macabre meeting on Our Scary Stories, keep your eyes wide, your hearts guarded, and your doors locked. Sweet dreams, or shall I say, haunting nightmares. This is Our Scary Stories signing off for tonight.